Hi, my name's Neil. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me. Recently, most of my video content has been going through the previous year, just kind of documenting and talking about the progress that I made. We're finally almost getting to the end of those videos. We are up to November. And so we're just going to do a little review, a little look at the sessions that I filmed in November and just reflect on what went on. Over the last couple of months, I started to make a bit of a regular thing of visiting XC skate park in Hemel Hempstead, which is just north of London. I really enjoy skating pools, and this one just happens to have a pool inside, so it's undercover, which makes it quite a good place to go in the winter months when it's dark outside or the weather is bad. So I'd been there a couple of times before. If you've been following my videos, you'll see that I started to go there a bit more regularly. And so this first bit of footage is from there. Now in this session, I've been skating a little bit, started to warm up okay, and decided to get my camera out. Now actually the timing couldn't have been better. The first thing that I filmed was probably one of my most epic slams ever. So I'm going to just roll that and let you watch that first, and then we're going to talk about it. So let's check that out. Yeah, right. That was pretty frightening. What happened? Well, the previous couple of times I'd gone there, I'd sort of mustered up the courage to try and do some 50-50 grinds in the deep end there. It's a little bit lower than Crystal Palace Skate Park where I usually go, but arguably a little bit tighter. The whole thing's just a little bit tighter and smaller. So yeah, the last session I went there, I got a couple of 50-50s and I thought, all right, this is doable, I can do this. And at the beginning of this session, before I got my camera out, I'd done a couple and it felt all right. And once I got my camera out and put it down, I thought, all right, I'll go for one, catch it on film. And I'm going to run it back in kind of slow motion for you so you can see exactly what happened. If you look very carefully at my trucks and my feet on my board as I turn in okay, just as usual, really. It's quite a tight turn that I usually take to get onto a 50-50 on something steep. I turned onto it okay, and the truck is latched onto the coping to begin with. I'm leaning over with my toes on the toe side of the board quite far. And what actually happens is that the board flattens down onto the top of the platform. Usually I hold it in at an angle locked onto the coping, using the wheels to kind of lock me on. And what actually happened was that my board kind of flattened down just because I didn't have enough leverage in my toes to hold it over. I think basically my toes were a bit too far over towards the middle of the deck, and so I didn't quite have that leverage on the side of the deck. So anyway, the board flattens out and has lost its lock on the coping, and it just starts to slide out towards the platform even further. I'm on my tiptoes at that point, and I've got no traction. I've got no purchasing power on my toes at all. So the whole thing just scoops out from under me. And as I go down, I sort of try to step over the coping as I go, but I catch my shin on the coping, which then flips me straight down into a dive. And luckily for me, I didn't hit my face, but I kind of landed on my chest and my whole body slides down the transition quite safely, but it was a bit of a shock. But yeah, I slid down the transition on my belly. I was okay, made a bit of a joke of it by doing a bit of a swimming motion that I had dived into the pool. What made me really laugh was Sam Beckett's reaction. You can see him just off to the side of the bowl as that happened, and he winced as if that was going to be some terrible mess in the bottom of the pool, and it just really made me laugh looking back at the footage. So we can watch that back in slow-mo and just see what's happening there, and yeah, you see me bash my shin. And actually, that was the damage, really. My shin, I put a huge dent in my shin. It really hurt, but I didn't realize until I'd kind of got up and walked off and sort of stood to the side. But yeah, I put a huge dent in my shin. Really, really hurt. It was super tender. And so I did skate for the rest of the session, but in a fair bit of pain. And I couldn't touch my shin, it was hurting that much. And the next few sessions, actually, I had to wear some football shin pads because the thought of accidentally just tapping that shin, it was so painful. It was going to be excruciating if my board accidentally hit it. But you live and learn, and it was a pretty epic slam, and something to catch on video and make it worthwhile. So we get that out of the way first and get on to the rest of the session. So the other things that I was trying to do in the pool and get used to doing, I wanted to practice doing front side kick turns and eventually to slash grinds in the deep end. Also try to throw up some rock and rolls in the shallow end, in the sort of middle bit of the shallow end. And that pool is super steep, and so you have to think super fast and move super fast to get a rock and roll there, and it just wasn't working for me. Also, I was getting backside 50-50s in the shallow end, and I was really trying to work my way to getting them long enough to go around the steps, but I wasn't carving wide enough or going fast enough, or, all those things to get myself to the steps, and I kept stopping above the steps. It was like I couldn't just get past them and then go in. It was really annoying. And also, not to be deterred by that epic slam, I thought I'd better get back on there and at least get one or two before I left. Otherwise, the next time that I went back, I would probably be too scared to try again. So just spent a little bit of time doing that. And you can see my hesitance. I bailed a few because it didn't feel quite right. And it just took me a little while to get back onto it. One of them that you will see, I kind of bail off the front, and that's because there's actually a chunk missing from the coping, a gap between the blocks. There's some filler missing, and so if you hit that just wrong, if you're not lucky, sometimes you can catch on it and it just throws you off the front. So there are still valid reasons to be a little bit afraid, because catching it in the wrong place does just kick you off the front. So you've got to be pretty quick with your bails and getting to your knee slide. Otherwise, things could, again, look pretty spectacular. So once I got back on the horse with the 50-50s in that deep end, it was the end of the session, and I was gladly going to call it a night. All right, so the next session was at Bay 66 skate park, which is my local skate park. Now, as I said before, I was having to wear some shin pads on my badly damaged shin from that epic slam in the pool. And so unusually for me, I wasn't wearing shorts because I was hiding my shin pads underneath the long legs of the trousers, because the rest of the time, like all year round, I wear shorts. They just work better for me when I'm wearing my knee pads. Now, just to explain what I was doing in this session, for quite some time now, I've been really wanting to start thinking about doing Smith grinds, like frontside Smith grinds. And the problem with just getting on with that is that my frontside stuff is pretty abysmal. I'm really bad at frontside generally. So I'm trying to change that. I started out by just trying to refine my frontside slash grinds a bit better, which is fine. And that helped me kind of learn to get the rotation a bit better. And from there, I moved on to trying to improve my frontside axle stalls and just frontside 50-50 grinds. I had kind of learned those to a just about passable standard, perhaps in the last couple of years, but they were so inconsistent I couldn't do them every time. my balance on them was terrible. And so most of the time I would not lean back far enough. And as I'd turn in quite abruptly, I would end up sort of falling forward onto the platform. I just wasn't leaning back enough and pushing into my heel side wheels to be able to kind of stay there and then turn back in again. What I needed to do was do a lot more front side axle stalls and 50/50s. I'd started doing that quite a bit. I don't think I'd filmed much of it up until this point, but because of that shin injury, I decided that I would just work on them and just hammer them over and over and over again. Now, it looks pretty boring to just watch, but I just want to explain what was going on and what I was doing. And then you can maybe look out for that in the footage if you're interested enough to watch it. So to start with the front side axle stall, I needed to go into it a lot more relaxed and a lot more leaning back and maintaining the board at the angle of the transition, not standing right up on top so that I tipped further forward. I needed to stay leaning back in the same plane as the transition so that my body is coming out of the transition like this way. If you stand up on top too much, the compulsion is to fall forward. And so it was a case of leaning back that far to make myself not tip forward, trusting my heel side wheels up against the coping and just doing that a million times. So in the video here, I'm mostly doing it as axle stalls, but I was also doing ones where I was carving wider and doing longer 50/50 grinds like that and practicing the turn back out at the same time. The turn back out I find really difficult. I can't carve out quite so well as I do with a backside 50/50. I kind of end up lifting up and kind of 5-0ing out of it a little bit, but also giving like a little hop to make sure I clear the coping. So you'll probably see that here with the stalls, where I kind of give a little hop as I go in. It doesn't look particularly smooth, but it's a case of making sure that I keep some weight on my back foot heel as I turn to completely minimize the chances of hanging up. Now, if you just turn like a 90-degree kick turn out into dead air, into space, rather than riding down the ramp, there's a high chance that you're going to hang up because your wheels will just roll back over the coping. So you do need to lean back even more and turn and sort of pivot on that heel side wheel as you turn. And it's taken me a very long time to relax enough to start doing that. Going through those motions a million times is just kind of like teaching that muscle memory, teaching myself that it's all right and that's how it's supposed to feel. And then what I slowly started to bring into that equation was, you know, I'd do 2 or 3 frontside axle stalls, but maybe on the last one, I would try and lean back enough that I could keep the front wheels and truck light enough to be able to just rotate it a little bit further than the coping and hang it off the edge. And really it was an exercise in getting used to how much I need to lean back to be able to have the front light and floating. And you need the front floating to be able to do a Smith. I've never really heard many people talk about it, but I did hear somebody say, and it made total sense to me, that doing a Smith grind is basically like doing a front side grind, like a front side 5-0, but with your front of the board tipped down below the coping. So all your balance has to be right at the back of the board. You have to be like right back on, like leaning backwards that way and that way, and with your back leg bent enough that you're kind of controlling it rather like a manual. But with a manual, you're standing above the pivot point of the truck, basically the axle. You're mostly standing above there, but you can push back and forth to kind of control the balance. With a 5-0 or a Smith, your body weight and your hips are kind of behind the back truck a bit more, at least to get that balance, because what you're doing is you're pushing back into the heel wheel with your heel, and your front leg is dead straight pointing out, and all that your front leg is doing is kind of regulating the height of the the board as you're there. So really it is like a manual or a 5/0, but you're just dipping it down lower. So arguably you need to get quite good at doing frontside 5/0s, frontside grinds before you try and do Smith grinds. And, you know, I'm no good at manuals or frontside 5/0s at all. So yeah, I need to work on all those things. But the way that I decided I was going to start doing it was to do the Smith stop. You know, that was the original Smith grind. And the Smith stop was literally a frontside turn into the Smith position and hold it there and then go back in again.
Hey, this is Steve Caballero, and today's episode of Pro Tech Technique, we're here at Pood Skate Park, and we're going to be doing the frontside Smith grind. First, initially invented by Mike Smith with the Smith stop, where he would do a frontside pivot, hit his front rail on the coping, and then come in. And I think it was Alan Losey that actually took it a little bit farther and started grinding it really far, which led into the Smith grind. Basically, on a front Smith, you want to be able to know how to do a frontside grind properly. I like to learn on something small first and then take it to something higher. But you got to really make sure that you can actually lock your rail in and that it's steep enough, your rail is, or your side of your board is grinding and hitting the coping. When you're approaching that at speed, you want to go really fast, and as soon as you get up on the grind, you want to immediately put your front rail down and pushing down on your toes and kind of leaning back and just kind of gliding around the coping. And as soon as you feel like you're going to lose your speed, then you lift off your weight and put your weight on your heels and then kind of guide yourself back in. You know, it's something that you want to work your way up to. You know, start with Smith stops, and then once you have a Smith stop wire where you go up and you pivot on your back truck, hit the rail, come in. You can go up it with a little bit of speed, and then you just start going a little bit faster where you can kind of maybe grind one block and then come in and go a little faster, grind 2 blocks, and then just give it your all and just do a gnarly one. Smith grinds can be done on mini ramps, which you have a straight wall, and it can be done in bowls where you got a curve. For myself, I prefer a curved bowl because it seems to lock in and it seems like to be able to go longer versus doing one on a ramp where you have to really push and kind of go sideways. It's nothing to lock you in, but when you're in a bowl, it seems to like lock you in and you're kind of going around in a circle. So for myself, to do a longer Smith grind, I would rather do it in a bowl. It's all about weight distribution. And so when you're first going up the wall, you have your weight centered on your feet. And then as you go up into the Smith grind, you want to put all your weight on your toes. And while you're grinding, all your weight's on your toes. And when you're about ready to come in, you shift all your weight to your heels to bring it in. So you come out of the lock and roll down the wall. So weight distribution is really important when you're doing Smith grind. Thank you guys for watching Pro Tech Technique, and comment below and just let us know what you want to see next.
And so that's what I'm trying to do here. Like every time I go and do a few frontside axle stalls, what I'm doing is preparing myself and sort of testing how much to lean back and keep leaning back and back to get it right, get the amount of lean back right. And then with the last one, I'm trying to take the front truck and wheels off the coping and dip it down a bit. But I still want the rail to be on the coping. I don't want to turn in so much that the board is dipping right down away from the coping. I need to be still pointing along the coping. I'm not trying to turn around and go back in like that. It's not a frontside grind, it's not a frontside slash. A lot of people do this kind of frontside pivot and back in again, and they're bored, they're turning right round and dipping back down into the ramp in one kind of pivot. That's not what I'm going for. I want a proper Smith, which is getting up and onto it and resting your rail on the coping and still be pointing in the direction along the coping, and then when the time comes I will dip and turn away. You need to be able to control it being up there and hold it there, so that if you're going to do a long grind, you've got the balance to be leaning back on it enough to get a long grind. If you're just going up and pivoting and turning back where you come from, you're not getting up over the coping enough, and to me that's a road to nowhere. All right, you'll get the turn, but in my humble opinion, that's not a Smith. And you'll see that I start to get a few where it kind of holds there for a bit, but I'm still not leaning far back enough because I start to tilt over on my toes and then lose the balance and dip in to the ramp, and I sort of have to bail off. So I'm still working on pushing back even further, trusting leaning back even more. It's that classic thing with frontside stuff where you've got stuff going on behind you. It's the trust fall thing, you know, where you stand there and you know you have somebody behind you that you have to trust is going to catch you, and you lean back and fall, and that's really what it is. It's the trust fall, but it's learning to do that with your heels and feel how far back you can push. And I'm just really bad at that. Some people can do it quite naturally. Some people are just naturally good at frontside. I'm awful at that, and so I'm going through that process of just doing it over and over and over again to begin to feel comfortable doing it. So that's basically the entire session that I filmed. It was just practicing those. Okay, and then the next session I went back to the XC indoor pool again, and still with my damaged shins from the first one. I was still wearing the long trousers and the shin pads underneath just to try and protect them as much as possible. But I wanted to go back there and kind of get back to it, get the fears out of my head that might have built up in the days that I was away. So straight away, I decided to get back onto the 50/50s in the deep end and just, you know, knock the cobwebs out and feel better about it. So got back into that again. Luckily, no terrible mishaps this time. Had a couple where I got thrown off the front from that kind of gap in the pool coping. But after a bit, I came to terms with that. And actually, you know, saying about that gap in the coping, I actually took some epoxy putty with me and I filled up those gaps that I could see in the coping. And yeah, luckily enough, it stuck and it's still there. So a bit of pool coping repair. The company that owns the place just don't care about that sort of thing. I don't think they understand the fact that it's quite dangerous to have these gaps. But yeah, in a later session, I did go back and fill them because I had another epic slam, which you'll see in an upcoming video. So yeah, after that other epic slam, which was caused by that gap, I did fill the block, but I'll talk about that in the upcoming video. So anyway, yeah, I kind of knocked the cobwebs out, got those 50/50s going again, and then I decided I was going to try some other things and thought I'd throw up a couple of board slides just to see what it felt like, and the slides felt like they would work quite well. I just don't really have the technique at the moment of getting off them. I'm not going to go like rock fakie back in there because it's so steep. It's super steep. It's about, I think it's about 3 feet deep, but it goes almost vert, so it's proper pool style, and there's no way I'm feeling like doing a rock fakie back in from a fully decked board slide. So it will have to be a rock and roll slide. So then I started to try and beat the hell out of some rock and rolls, and they just really weren't working. I didn't really have the conviction to turn back out sharp enough, and because it's so shallow but steep, when I'm turning out of them, you get your board around and you're basically in the flat bottom already. So yeah, it's going to be a case of like really tightening that up and making it a lot quicker turn out to enable me to come out of a rock and roll or even a rock and roll slide. Arguably it would be easier to do a rock and roll and even perhaps a slide in the deep end, but I just haven't really got the balls for that at the moment. So yeah, I started to hammer some rock and rolls, but it was really beginning to hurt my legs, my ankles, my shins, everything. And with that already damaged shin, I felt like it was battering me. So I got pretty close, but I didn't actually make any. But again, it's all good practice. It's good to throw things out there and just see what it feels like, see whether it's even doable. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So in all, that is the November footage. Only 3 sessions recorded, but there was a lot going on in the meantime in between. And as I've mentioned before, I usually do try and skate at least 2 or 3 times a week. No vert that month, I don't think, or at least none filmed. I'm not making any vert progress really at the moment. And some of the days that I've been going to the XC indoor pool were days that I would normally go vert skating. So yeah, I'm kind of switching them out a little bit. But the weather was too bad for skating outdoor pools, so indoor was good for me. Anyway, that's November. I hope that you found it interesting to watch, and I hope it's not boring the hell out of you, me doing these reviews. But as I've mentioned many times before, this channel is kind of a diary for me to remember what I've been doing, where I've got to, so that in years to come, I can go back and look at what my progress was. Hopefully it helps some of you with your progress as well. And, you know, if you've got any questions about what I'm doing or how I think about what I'm doing when I'm doing it, how I try to learn stuff, then by all means, hit me up in the comments section. I'm not really into doing tutorials because it's all personal really, and some tutorials are pretty good to help you kind of get the knack of what you're doing, but they I don't know, they don't really kind of interest me at the moment. So things that I can do really, really well, I'm quite happy to do a video on, but until that point, I don't think the beginners should try and be the teachers, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I hope that you want to stick around and watch December's. That will be coming up very shortly, and then we've got the year of 2023 out of the way, and I can get onto other things. So as ever, thanks for your support. Smash the like button if you liked it, and yeah, subscribe if you're really interested, but don't worry about it. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.